At the Philly group, Mose made a call. "Hey, Gary. I've sent the money you wanted. You guys should be making your move soon, right?" At the end of the workday, Fraser sat in the restaurant he had booked and waited for more than an hour without seeing any trace of his wife. Then his phone rang. It was Natalia. "Fraser, help! Come here quickly!" Before she could finish her sentence, the call ended with a cry of utter fear. Concerned, he tried to call her back. However, it appeared that her phone had been turned off. His intuition told him that something had happened to her, and he tried his best to keep calm. Evidently panicking, he decided that he needed to find her whereabouts as soon as possible. He went back to the Robster Corporation and found Henry. "Natalia is in trouble," he said. "Help me find out where she is." Henry nodded knowingly.
"Actually, Mr. Macklemore, I just received the news and was about to inform you. Your wife was probably captured by Gary Mendez. According to my men, it's got something to do with Mose."
"Damn it!" Fraser smashed his fist on the wall. He knew that Mose wasn't a good person. "Who is this Mendez?" he asked. Henry shook his head and said,
"He's the leader of one of the 3 biggest gangs in San Clemente. But don't worry. We've already investigated and found out that they are currently at the McKinsey Club. I'll gather some men to go with you."
"There's no need. Just send the location of that place to my cell phone and I'll go by myself," Fraser spoke in a hurry. He grabbed a black trench coat hanging near the door and rushed out of Henry's office.
"Mr. Macklemore, you can't go by yourself. It's far too dangerous,"
Henry shouted as he chased after Fraser. Henry caught up with him when he stopped to wait for the elevator. He was putting on the black trench coat and he looked determined. The aura around him was completely different from how it had been a moment before. He gave the impression of being both powerful and single-minded. Nothing was going to stop him. He had kept his power hidden for a long time, but with someone he loved being threatened, it was time for him to put on his armor again. As a precaution, Henry still called his men. He couldn't bear the consequence of Fraser being hurt. In a luxurious private room on the top floor of the McKinsey Club, a man with a knife scar on his forehead was rubbing his chin and looking at 2 women leaning against the wall with their hands and feet tied together. One of them was Natalia, and the other was her best friend, Sheila. The man, whose name was Gary Mendez, was pleased to see that they were 2 beauties. He looked at Natalia and said,
"No wonder Mose was so desperate to get a hold of you. You have a great body. I heard that you have a useless husband. What a pity."
The women were gagged, so they couldn't say a single word. They could only shake their heads, which they did violently.
"Just accept that you're here and stop resisting. You can't do anything about it, so you might as well enjoy it."
That caused an outbreak of sniggering among the other men in the room. The door creaked as a man with a green tattoo on his face pushed it open and walked in. He was a member of Gary's gang, and his name was Ryan Briggs. When he saw the 2 girls who were tied up, he frowned. Gary glanced at the man and asked,
"Ryan, have you told that guy Mose that we have them?"
Ryan nodded and said,
"Yes, I have. He said he'll be here in half an hour." "Half an hour? How dare he make me wait for half an hour?"
Gary slammed his knife on the table. With his anger intimidating the 2 women, his dangerous gaze fell on Natalia and Sheila again. He said,
"Well, half an hour will be more than enough time for me to play with these 2 first. Letting Mose get the leftovers doesn't seem like a big deal."
"That seems reasonable,"
one of the men said.
"But don't forget to leave something for the rest of us, too."
Gary rubbed his hands together and slowly walked toward the 2 girls, a lustful look on his face. Seeing him approach, the women began to struggle even harder. Before he could reach them, Ryan stood in front of him and said in a deep voice,
"We have our own rules in this business. They're prisoners who've done nothing against us. Is this appropriate?" "Stay out of this," Gary ordered.
He pushed Ryan to the ground, then spat at him before ordering his men to tie him up as well.
"You're still lecturing me about rules at a time like this? What a disappointment you are," Gary blurted.
Gary cursed angrily and turned back to stare greedily at Natalia and Sheila. Within a moment, his large hands viciously grabbed at the two women. They tensed up, afraid that they wouldn't be able to escape. Suddenly, there was a loud bang as the door was kicked open and a man wearing a black mask and black trench coat rushed in. Gary turned around and saw that someone was trying to spoil his plans. His eyes flashed with a murderous light, and he asked,
"Who the hell are you?" "I'm the one who's going to take your miserable life," replied the masked man.
When the masked man saw Natalia's disheveled clothes and the red palm print on her face, he felt a monstrous rage in his heart. A blond man cursed a few times and said, "Stranger, do you know who our boss is? You're making a big mistake by threatening him." The man then grabbed a bottle and went to smash it on the masked man's head. The masked man looked coldly at the blond man and raised his arm just as the bottle was about to hit his head. There was a loud crash as the bottle shattered, and the masked man caught a large glass shard. Before the blond man could react, he jabbed his hand forward and shoved the shard into the man's chest. The man coughed and fell to the ground, half dead. A few seconds of silence took over the room, and there was no more movement from him. The entire room was deathly shocked, and everyone's eyes were focused on the masked man. Natalia was terrified by the sight of what had just happened. As for Sheila, her eyes were glowing. A man who was vicious and aloof had always been her favorite type. Moreover, the mysterious and heroic aura of the masked man made her heart beat even faster.
"Who are you?" Gary asked. "My guys are considered to be the best in San Clemente, so I hope that you can explain yourself." "I already told you. I'm the one who's come to take your miserable life."
The masked man took some large strides forward. The others were stunned for a moment before pulling out their weapons and charging ahead.
"Attack! Attack! Get him!"
However, even though there were a lot of them, none were a match for the masked man, and they were all defeated easily. In less than 2 minutes, all of them had been knocked to the ground. The masked man turned his attention to Gary, who had never seen anyone so skilled. As the man in black moved toward him, Gary took a step back every time the man took a step forward. For once in his life, he was genuinely petrified. When he had reached the wall and had nowhere to retreat, he tried to calm the situation down.
"Okay, you win. If you let me go, I'll give you half of what I was paid for doing this job."
"Go to hell." Gary took out a sharp blade to protect himself, and with a resolute expression, he darted forward to stab the masked man's throat. Natalia and Sheila started to whine again, seemingly trying to warn the masked man to be careful. The man grabbed Gary's head, and with a quick twist, Gary fell to the ground, dead. There was a moment of silence. The masked man looked at the two women. He lightly pursed his lips but didn't bother with them. Instead, he walked out. However, as he passed Ryan, who was still tied up, he reached down and untied the ropes as he hissed, "Come with me." Natalia frowned as she once again heard the slightly familiar voice. For a moment, she fell into deep thought. Seeing the back of the man, she felt that his movements and silhouette were a little like Fraser's. However, when she thought of the masked man's skills, she quickly tossed that thought to the back of her mind. Although Fraser had fought in front of her before, He was not even close when compared to the man who had just saved them. Fraser is so unreliable, she thought. I've called him, but he still hasn't come to help me. She didn't notice that Sheila, who was still beside her, was completely infatuated. The masked man entered the restroom and took off the mask, revealing Fraser's face.
To watch the full episode, install the Pocket FM app